a great outcome when it comes to the CS addressing the pertinent issues that touch on the daily lives of Kenyans, and these are the basic items such as the cost of basic commodities such as maize flour, sugar, cooking oil. And that is CS Ukur Yattani getting into the VIP lift at the Treasury buildings, ready to take on Kenyans as he will be spelling out his achievements during his tenure in office, as well as the Jubilee administration. And he'll also be telling us how he plans to spend the money, as well as which areas of tax will we be seeing on this. A beehive of activity there at the National Treasury, our teams making all attempts to get you all the action from the National Treasury. We have those live updates coming out from the National Treasury, and there is the main entrance into the National Treasury. And of course, coming back to our discussion as we continue monitoring developments from there, and they should be exiting in a short while. And of course, CS Ukur Yattani will be making his way to Parliament. And we do understand that he will be starting his budget speech. He was intended to start his budget speech at exactly 2:30 p.m. He's running late by just about 2 minutes so far. And we will, of course, be broadcasting this live for you here on KTN News. And remember, our hashtag for this conversation is Uhuru Last Budget. Tweet us at KTN News KE. You can tweet us at Agina Abi, and we'll be able to sample some of your views on this very important milestone for the country. Well, live pictures coming out of the National Treasury there, and the CS will be making his way in a few minutes from now. And we can see some increase in activity, and the National Treasury is the epicenter of attention this afternoon, where Kenyans are keeping a close watch on this year's budget. CS Ukur Yattani there exiting the steps of the National Treasury, and quite focused in regards to giving us this year's budget. And he is flanked by the men who have been combing through the numbers, looking at the fine details to the point, ensuring that there is no error in the digits, there is no error in the speech, because all this is geared towards delivering a solid budget for the transitioning administration in office. There is the briefcase carrying this year's national budget, and we have CS Ukur Yattani just getting ready to make his way to Parliament. We can also see the Central Bank Governor, Dr. Patrick Njoroge, a man who has also been very instrumental in regards to instituting several reforms in the banking sector. And we can also see the taxman, that is the Commissioner General, also just standing next to the PS for the National Treasury. And this is the photo opportunity moment where the CS takes photo with the Treasury staff. These are the men and women who have helped him put this budget together, and indeed it is a major milestone for staff at the National Treasury. We understand that security is at an all-time high outside Treasury, even as CS Ukur Yattani will be making his way to the National Assembly, and he is looking quite upbeat from his facial expressions, looking to deliver this year's national budget. Will it be a rich man's budget? Will it be a poor man's budget? Who will benefit out of this year's budget? And those are the live pictures we have for you from the National Treasury. We can also see some of the Treasury mandarins, such as Dr. Sirima, who is standing just next to the Central Bank Governor, Dr. Patrick Njoroge, and these are the very instrumental men who have also played a key role. We can also see the director in charge of the public-private partnerships from the National Treasury just also standing there with the CS. And CS Ukur Yattani has been very on record indicating that his approach will be to ensure that he does a very critical task in balancing and ensuring that all sides of the coin benefit out of this. We also have live pictures from Parliament, where security remains at top notch. the roads have been blocked, and we can be able to bring this to you in a short while. And there we have it, the live pictures just showing you the Harambee Avenue, where they will be proceeding to the National Assembly, and not a beehive of activity outside Parliament per se. Traditionally would see crowds which would be outside the National Treasury, and this year we are seeing sort of a very relaxed environment, not major crowds, and perhaps an indication of a population of Kenyans who are fatigued by the high taxes, or it could be that they are deeply looking for opportunities to make money, that they don't have time to go to the National Assembly to monitor the speech. CS Ukur Yattani there just having his moment in the sun, ready to move to Parliament, and he has been of course leading a team at the Treasury throughout this entire month. This year's budget comes several months earlier than usual. Ordinarily, budget day would come around the month of June, the first week of June, but because of the upcoming elections, the National Treasury had to move the budget reading earlier, and this of course has a big implication. And across the region, the various East African countries will also be presenting their budgets in June, and there CS Ukur Yattani being escorted to his motor vehicle, where he'll be making his way to the National Assembly, and a bit of commotion a bit there as the various security agencies are trying to make sure it's a smooth transition. Those are live pictures from Parliament, and we can clearly see people not as much as usual, and we also have Ukur Yattani driving in a Passat. Remember the Passats? The Passats came into the limelight during President Uhuru Kenyatta's reign when he was finance minister back in 2009, and of course this was a measure towards curbing the guzzlers that the government officers were used to. So this clearly demonstrates that they went for more fuel-efficient cars compared to the fuel guzzlers that were the main preoccupation back in the day. And CS Ukur Yattani taking the front seat in his with his entourage. He'll be driving outside. He's actually being driven right now live to Parliament. Clearly a host of activity happening there. A battery of reporters, photographers, everyone scrambling to get the best shots to ensure that they have the color and the razzmatazz that characterizes this financial year's budget. And Ukur Yattani being given heavy security as he makes his way to Parliament. And this year's budget is coming in at a time when Kenyans have continued to decry the high cost of living, where we've seen the basic food items, fuel prices have been soaring, and this has left many exposed to the harsh effects it has had on their pockets, on their wallets. And remember, this year's budget also comes at a time when the country is staring at an election in August, and this has a big implication on how this year's budget will be tabled and what will be the key hallmarks of this budget. Well, live pictures there with our security, our camera team, which is making all efforts to give you very solid pictures, solid coverage here on KTN News, where we tell you the whole story. And those are live pictures outside Parliament Road, where we expect to see CS Ukur Yattani making his way into Parliament. And our teams are also still standing by in Parliament. We have Noah Kipkemboi, as well as Duncan Haemba and Brian George Otieno, and the motorcade making its way slowly from Treasury building to Parliament. And these live pictures that we are going to get you as we continue with this very important day as the country awaits the budget. And perhaps I'd like to engage with one of my guests as we continue to give you those live pictures. And we have now Faith Atiti. Thank you, Faith, from NCBA. Perhaps what are your major expectations as this year's budget is being read?
Thank you, Abby, for having me. As For expectation, I think the mood is very clear across the country. Everyone is complaining about the cost of living. It's not just limited to consumers but businesses as well. So much as, yes, the economic context with which we're getting into the budget with doesn't give us room for much hope, we are hopeful that the government through this budget will at least make the burden a bit easier, even if it's just making sure that the supply is available for consumers, and of course for businesses, just the business environment remains somewhat stable. We're seeing a lot of noise in the market, and of course the structure of the financing, as Bilo said, we're still going to have to run a very huge deficit, possibly upwards of 7-8%. How is it going to be funded, and what will be the implication for markets? So we're seeing constraints on the government side, but we're hoping they could make it a whole lot more rather conducive for the private sector to invest. And this is making it, reducing the much they are taking from the market to allow the banks to extend credit to the private sector. I think it will make it a bit easier for businesses during this difficult time, given it's very difficult for government. Things are not only difficult for the consumer and businesses, but the government is also in a very tight spot to promise much to consumers and businesses at the moment. So we are not expecting much, but still hoping for something.
So you are in the banking sector. Any areas that you suspect we might see an increase in taxes? Especially, we already heard earlier on from Ukur Yattani saying that he will be doing a modest adjustment in some of the taxes, and he was not categorical, but of course in a short while from now we'll get to hear the exact tax measures that he has in place.
Yes, like I mentioned before, making the environment conducive for businesses is very critical. I remember much as the government has been trying to create jobs, still the bulk of employment comes from the private sector. So increasing tax at this moment when literally the cost of everything is skyrocketed is honestly not an option. So maybe we could have the usual sin tax, but even that sector of the business is equally suffering. But I think the least they can do at the moment is just hold status quo and maybe lessen the restriction, including just the sheer better management of the scrap metal ban to make sure activity is not significantly constrained at a time when production is already a challenge for most businesses.
To you, Faith, and getting it back to Senator Kero. Of course, for many Kenyan, the big question is what taxes will he spare us this time around? Are there, in your assessment, Senator Kero, which areas of taxation is he likely to target, and which areas is he also likely to go easy on the mwananchi? We've had sentiments around the cost of cooking gas. This has had a big impact on communities, and what would be your take on this?
In terms of taxation, really, I don't think it's easy to find areas in the economy today where you can tax and not burden the entire economy. Unless the specific measures they have done, like in the last couple of years on multinational corporations, or specific measures that are targeting that kind of area. But I think what we expect is that it's an election year. The government will want to be seen to have a populist budget. The government itself, through its leader, is supporting, is actively a player in the elections. So you would expect that maybe they can relieve Kenyans on some of the taxes or levies. Particularly, I think. Minister just confirmed, CS confirmed a couple of days ago that they cannot sustain the subsidy on the fuel, which means the only alternative they have is reduce the levies and the taxes on fuel. I don't think there's any other way if they cannot provide a subsidy. We expect them to, if they are really serious, to reduce the taxes on basic commodities import. like cooking oil. I mean, you can reduce the VAT, you can reduce the IDF, IRML, and all the taxes which are really on, so that when you import these commodities, then the cost will be down, and so that the cost can be passed, the lower cost can be passed on to consumers. So it is really about making the cost of basic essentials affordable, and the main ingredient is energy, is one of them. So I think it would make a lot of sense if they can look at those areas, and I hope they will. Because otherwise it's going to be very difficult. Today, as we speak, some of our businesses are not able to run because there's no fuel, and business and the petroleum companies are not willing to provide because they don't get money for subsidy. Otherwise, it will go up to 160, 170. So I hope he will. But like I said earlier, he can only do these things if he can reduce his expenditure, and with the 3.3 trillion. Already announced of expenditure, and the estimates that he has already published in the budget policy papers and so forth, it's not going to be easy, but let's wait and see what he has.
All right. We continue to bring you the live pictures from Parliament, and we can clearly see the CS has arrived at Parliament, and a beehive of activity outside the gates of Parliament, where the CS Ukur Yattani will be presenting this year's national budget. He is, of course, in the company of the top leadership of the National Treasury, as well as the various agencies that are linked to the National Treasury, which includes the Central Bank of Kenya, the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, as well as a host of other multi-government ministries and agencies who are key stakeholders in the budget-making process. And listening to Senator Kero, I'd like to bring in my panelists who are also with me here in studio now. And CPA Makori, perhaps listening to the big conversation around fuel has been an area that we cannot run away from in terms of having prices that are reflective of the market happenings. I'd like to hear your take on what approach is he likely to consider when it comes to fuel.
Sorry, I think that's one of the areas that I mean is going to be a good balancing act for the CS. Because remember that fuel prices are not just dictated by local circumstances. The international market is going to dictate how prices move, and the crisis that is ongoing between Ukraine and Russia has an impact to this. So we might have to go slow on our, I mean, even if we gave concession on taxes, but then we have to deal with the issue of the increase in crude prices per gallon.
All right.
And that's where the challenge is. We might give the concession, I mean, he might read the concessions today.